today, I want to speak to you about a habit that fundamentally rewired my brain, reshaped my perception of time, and transformed the trajectory of my personal and professional life, the 5 a.m. habit. Now, before your mind reaches for the usual cliches of waking up early and grinding harder, I want you to pause and consider something deeper. This isn't about discipline for discipline's sake. This is about neurobiology. It's about leveraging the natural architecture of your brain and nervous system to align your internal state with the external demands of life in a way that multiplies your clarity, motivation, and sense of agency. The time you wake up isn't just a number on a clock. It's a lever that controls cascading biochemical processes in your body, your mood, your energy, and your cognitive performance. Today, I'm going to share with you what waking up at 5 a.m. did for me and why it might just change your life too. When we talk about optimizing performance, enhancing focus, and improving emotional resilience, what we're really discussing is the management of our brain and body's internal states. Everything about how you feel, how you perform, and how you interact with the world is shaped by predictable biological processes. One of the most central being your circadian rhythm. This is your body's internal clock, a roughly 24-hour cycle that governs sleep-wake patterns, hormone release, core body temperature, and even gene expression. Now, what many people don't realize is that the alignment of your behavior with this natural rhythm is not optional. It's fundamental to your health, mood, and cognitive functioning. The reason the 5 a.m. habit is so powerful is because it intentionally synchronizes your waking state with the ideal phases of your circadian biology, setting off a chain reaction of neural and hormonal events that prime you for peak mental and physical performance. At around 4 to 6 a.m., your body temperature is at its lowest. Melatonin levels, the hormone associated with sleepiness, begin to drop, and cortisol, the hormone associated with alertness and readiness, starts to rise in preparation for the demands of the day. This natural biological shift is known as the cortisol awakening response. If you wake up at 5 a.m. and immediately expose yourself to natural or artificial bright light, you reinforce the timing of your internal clock through a mechanism governed by the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus. This region of the brain acts as the master and keeper, receiving light cues via the eyes and adjusting the body's internal timing accordingly. That light exposure triggers a suppression of residual melatonin and an amplification of cortisol, which, contrary to its bad reputation, is not inherently harmful. In healthy amounts and at appropriate times, cortisol is your biological get-up-and-go molecule, increasing alertness, mobilizing energy stores, and sharpening mental acuity. What happens next is equally important. Waking up at 5 a.m. allows you to experience this natural cortisol rise in alignment with environmental cues, specifically early morning light, which has profound downstream effects on mood regulation, stress resilience, and cognitive function. Studies from chronobiology and neuroendocrinology show that when your internal rhythms are in sync with the external environment, you experience improvements in mood, reaction time, working memory, and decision-making ability. Misalignment, such as sleeping late or irregular wake times, disrupts these processes, increasing susceptibility to anxiety, depressive symptoms, metabolic issues, and impaired executive function. So what the 5 a.m. wake up really accomplishes is a neurobiological calibration, ensuring your brain's readiness state matches the demands of the day. Beyond this, early rising influences dopamine signaling in the brain, the neurotransmitter most associated with motivation, reward, and goal-directed behavior. Dopamine operates on a circadian pattern too, with a natural rise in the early hours when paired with movement, light exposure, and intentional activity. By waking at 5 a.m. and stepping into those conditions, even something as simple as stepping outside, stretching, or taking a brisk walk, you're activating dopaminergic circuits in the ventral tegmental area and the nucleus accumbens. This leads to a sense of drive, purpose, and readiness that can persist throughout the day. It isn't about mythical willpower, it's a biologically engineered state that's highly reproducible. The other crucial aspect is the effect on the autonomic nervous system, the balance between your sympathetic and parasympathetic branch. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for mobilizing your body's resources to face challenges, while the parasympathetic system governs rest, recovery, and digestion. At dawn, there's a natural shift towards sympathetic activation, preparing you to engage with the world. By waking at 5 a.m., you lean into this transition, gaining a head start on regulating your physiological arousal states. Contrast this with waking late or irregularly, which can result in a blunted cortisol awakening response and a sluggish, disoriented state that makes emotional and cognitive regulation more difficult. Now, you might wonder, is it possible to simply shift this process to a later time if you're a so-called night owl? The answer is both yes and no. While chronotype, your natural propensity for waking early or staying up late, is influenced by genetics, it's also remarkably plastic and trainable through environmental cues, a phenomenon known as entrainment. Light exposure, meal timing, exercise, and social interaction all serve as zeitgebers, external time givers that can gradually shift your internal rhythm. Waking at 5 a.m. consistently, coupled with early light exposure, can retrain even the most die-hard night owl's circadian clock within weeks, improving mood, sleep quality, and overall cognitive function. Moreover, waking up early provides a predictable window for leveraging what neuroscientists call the phase advance effect. This is the phenomenon where shifting your wake time earlier by even 30 to 60 minutes can improve mood disorders, decrease anxiety, and enhance cognitive control, likely due to alterations in circadian phase relationships and dopamine-serotonin balance. Clinical research has demonstrated that early rising is associated with lower levels of perceived stress and better emotional regulation, especially when paired with structured morning activities such as exercise, breath work, or mindfulness practice. An additional mechanism worth noting is the modulation of core body temperature. Your core temperature follows a circadian pattern, reaching its nadir in the early morning and rising throughout the day. Body temperature is tightly coupled to cognitive performance. Higher temperatures generally correlate with improved alertness and faster reaction times. By waking at 5 a.m. and engaging in activity, you actively advance this temperature curve, accelerating the transition into a mentally optimal state. This is one reason why elite performers in various fields, athletes, entrepreneurs, scientists, often swear by early rising as a cornerstone of their routine. But perhaps the most underestimated aspect of waking at 5 a.m. is its effect on self-directed neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to rewire itself in response to experience and behavior. The first 30 to 60 minutes after waking is a unique window when neurochemical conditions, particularly elevated acetylcholine and noradrenaline, make your brain especially receptive to learning and habit formation. This state, known in neuroscience circles as a heightened plasticity window, means that behaviors, thoughts, and mental states engaged in this early period are more likely to become durable neural patterns. By deliberately engaging in intentional, goal-aligned activities at 5 a.m., whether it's journaling, physical training, or deep focus work, you're capitalizing on your brain's natural rewiring potential, effectively embedding those habits and cognitive states more deeply than you would at other times of the day. February, it's important to acknowledge the psychological effect of waking early in a world largely asleep. There's a primal evolutionary satisfaction to being ahead of the curve, a kind of socially unobserved autonomy that triggers feelings of control and mastery. These feelings in turn modulate brain circuits associated with agency and motivation, including the medial prefrontal cortex and anterior cingulate cortex. When you control your mornings, you send a powerful message to yourself about your capacity to influence your internal and external environments, creating a positive feedback loop that reinforces continued discipline and self-belief. In essence, the 5 a.m. habit isn't just a productivity hack, it's a comprehensive strategy for aligning your biological rhythms, neurotransmitter systems, and cognitive capacities in a way that creates a neurochemical advantage, improving how you feel, how you perform, and how resilient you are to the unpredictable demands of life. Every early wake up, every morning exposure to light, every moment of movement or reflection in those quiet hours, they're not small acts of discipline. They're biological interventions, scientifically grounded actions that recalibrate your nervous system, optimize your mental state, and quite literally change the structure and function of your brain over time. Modern life is defined by unpredictability. Every day, most of us wake up and are instantly swept into a torrent of demands, notifications, crises, and endless digital stimulation. The moment the phone lights up, the brain shifts into reactive mode, and from there, much of the day is dictated by external forces. What this creates over time is a loss of agency, a gradual erosion of control over one's mental and emotional state. One of the most effective antidotes to this relentless chaos is to claim control over the early hours of the day before the world starts making its demands. Rising at 5 a.m. carves out a space of intentionality and order in a world increasingly engineered for distraction. From a psychological and neurobiological standpoint, this decision creates a distinct competitive advantage, not just over others, but over your past reactive self. There's a powerful mechanism in the human brain known as the prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function, the ability to plan, regulate emotions, make decisions, and exert impulse control. Under conditions of stress and unpredictability, the function of this region is often compromised. There's already an unhealthy precedent of hypervigilance in the prefrontal cortex, while imparting emotional burdens, including exposure to unpredictable stressors, shrinks the dendritic connections in the prefrontal cortex, while amplifying activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear and threat detection center. What this means is that the more reactive your daily environment, the more likely you are to live in a state of hypervigilance and diminished rational control. By waking early, before the external world begins to flood your consciousness with stimuli, you allow the prefrontal cortex to operate without immediate competition from emotionally charged inputs. In those quiet hours, cognitive resources are available for reflection, prioritization, and proactive problem solving rather than reactive damage control. At a neurochemical level, early mornings are characterized by a unique balance of neurotransmitters and neuromodulators that prime the brain for focus and calm. Cortisol levels naturally rise, but in a controlled, anticipatory manner, not in response to external stressors. Acetylcholine, the neuromodulator associated with focus and plasticity, remains elevated from the sleep cycle. Dopamine, the molecule of motivation and drive, can be intentionally spiked through light exposure, movement, and breath work. This biochemical state fosters a sense of calm alertness, a readiness to engage with tasks in a deliberate, unhurried way. When you start your day this way, you effectively inoculate your nervous system against the volatility of what's to come. It's not that challenges won't appear. It's that your brain will be better equipped to respond with clarity instead of panic. There's also a concept in behavioral psychology known as the locus of control, which refers to the extent to which an individual believes they have power over events in their life. Those with an internal locus of control perceive themselves as active agents in shaping outcomes, while those with an external locus feel largely at the mercy of circumstance. However, waking at 5 a.m. establishes in a tangible way a dominant internal locus of control. It is a self-selected hardship, a voluntary act of discipline that signals to your own nervous system that you are in command. The repeated experience of choosing discomfort before the day even begins creates a psychological momentum, a sense of earned authority over one's mental state that tends to persist throughout the day. Cognitive psychology also teaches us about the principle of anchoring, the human tendency to rely heavily on the first piece of information encountered when making decisions. By starting the day with intentional, undistracted focus, you anchor your mind in clarity and discipline, making it far more likely that subsequent decisions will follow that initial frame. It's not simply a metaphor. Decisions made during the first waking hour influence the neurochemical tone of the entire day. Waking to stress, emails, or social media triggers immediate spikes in dopamine and noradrenaline in a chaotic, unregulated pattern, making it harder to regain control later. Conversely, a quiet, purpose-driven morning establishes a predictable pattern of neurotransmitter release, setting a neurochemical foundation that promotes better decision-making and emotional regulation as the day progresses. There's evolutionary logic to this as well. In ancestral environments, the early hours of the day were often the safest and most strategic for essential tasks like foraging, scouting, and preparing for the unpredictable dangers of daylight hours. Our nervous systems are still wired for this pattern. Waking early taps into an ancient behavioral algorithm, one that prioritizes preparation over reaction, intentionality over impulse. This evolutionary resonance is why many people report a primal sense of satisfaction from rising before dawn, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. The brain recognizes the advantage. Modern neuroscience also emphasizes the importance of predictability for psychological well-being. The human brain, particularly structures like the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, thrive in environments where routines and patterns exist. Predictable routines reduce cognitive load, conserve decision-making resources, and provide a stabilizing framework in the face of life's inherent uncertainty. The act of waking at 5 a.m. becomes more than a time on a clock. It's a stabilizing ritual that signals safety and control to the nervous system. Over time, this reduces baseline anxiety, improves sleep onset consistency, and enhances emotional resilience. You become less susceptible to the whims of circumstance, less thrown off balance by unpredictable events because your mind has been trained in consistency in addition to its effects on neurochemistry and cognitive function. Early rising grants access to a unique psychological terrain, solitude. Solitude, as distinct from loneliness, is a fertile state for introspection, creative problem solving, and self-directed thought. The modern world offers fewer and fewer moments of true solitude. The constant connectivity of digital life erodes opportunities for uninterrupted reflection. By claiming the early hours, you create a buffer between yourself and the demands of others. This is not mere sentimentality. It's supported by research on default mode network activity, the brain network associated with introspective thought, memory consolidation, and creativity. In states of solitude, the default mode network becomes active, allowing for lateral, integrative thinking and the kind of problem solving that isn't possible in the hyper-focused, task-driven states of later hours. This solitude also alters time perception. When the world is quiet and external demands are few, time stretches. A single focused hour at 5 a.m. can feel as cognitively productive as 3 scattered hours later in the day. This subjective expansion of time reduces stress by alleviating the persistent sense of racing against the clock that characterizes so much of modern life. With more perceived time comes more calm, and with more calm, better decision making. This isn't abstract theory. It's a tangible shift in the brain's processing of temporal information, influenced by the density of sensory input and cognitive load.